You're planning for okay, can you hear us? So, just to make sure, can you hear us? Volume is okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will introduce Felipe. We are going to speak in English today because there is some people here seeing the presentation. They are from abroad. So Felipe is going to present the joint work with me the next time about the dual and forward backward scenario, the composition method for convex stochastic programming. So Felipe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So as Carlos said, today I'm going to present a composition method that is actually that works for a general problem, but today we will discuss the application for stochastic programs. So first, I will talk about a more general, say standard algorithm, a progressive hedging algorithm. That's the composition method for stochastic optimization problems. And then I will explain how our approach applies to stochastic optimization and also compare with progressive hedging. And so first, the problem that we are interested in is a problem that has a special structure. We seek to minimize a function, a convex function, subject to convex constraints. And why this structure is special is because we can reformulate this problem as a minimization of the sum of two functions, h plus in this case the indicator that represents the constraints, where the indicator function is the one that takes the value 0 on the set, on the physical set, and plus infinite otherwise. And this is the special structure. We can use this sum and exploit separate properties. For example, here h in the context of stochastic optimization is a parallel, while the indicator, well, is 0 or plus infinite, so it has different properties from the objective function. So we want to exploit those properties separately. So in the stochastic optimization setting, we have, or we assume that we have a finite number of outcomes, these scenarios. And we also have that the time horizon, we divide it into stages. And in each stage, we make a decision. The general formulation of this of the stochastic optimization problem is the following. So we want to minimize as a problem function. Here, capital S is the number of possible outcomes in scenarios, and PS is the probability associated with this scenario. So essentially, here we are minimizing the expected cost, subject to a special constraint called the non-anticipativity constraint. In simple terms, this constraint says that we cannot use information from the future to make decisions now. And this is because throughout the time horizon, uncertainty is progressively revealed. So for example, in the first stage, we do not have any knowledge of the uncertain information, but still we have to make a decision. And once the first stage finishes, we have partial information revealed, and we can use that information to make the decision in the second stage. And that non-anticipativity constraint is actually a linear constraint, so it defines a linear subspace. Graphically, the non-anticipativity constraint looks like this. So we have a scenario tree here, and the non-anticipativity constraint says that, well, in the first stage, all the scenarios look the same because we do not have prior knowledge of, we know the probability distribution, but we do not know what is the actual outcome. And well, for the second stage here, right here, for the second stage here, we have partial information. So some of the scenarios still look the same, but we can start differentiating between the scenarios. And that happens throughout the time horizon. So even though we have a decomposable objective function, right? Because we write as expected value, we have a coupling constraint, the non-anticipativity constraint. And this is even though it couples the variables, it has a special structure again that we can exploit. And we can rewrite this constraint as x equals to the projection of x onto the subspace, right? And this is the interpolation of the constraint that we use to define the Lagrangian. So the trick here is that we are going to decouple by relaxing this coupling constraint. And then we are going to pass it to the objective function. So the Lagrangian in this case is simply the original expected function plus the linear relaxation. And here, since W is the dual multiplier, the dual variable, it belongs to the non-anticipativity in the subspace in the dual space, which in this case corresponds to the orthogonal. So this term here, W times the projection onto N is 0 because they are orthogonal, right? So we can write the Lagrangian as again as expected value. So Lagrangian again is separable. So we have separable Lagrangian now. And we can, we also take the same structure for the dual function. In this case, I define the dual function as minus the minimum of the Lagrangian because I prefer to work with initialization problems just because of that. So we have a separable Lagrangian and also a separable dual function. And the non-anticipativity constraint, as I said, in the dual space is nothing different from the orthogonal space, right? So here we have the dual formulation, and it has the same splitting structure as a primal problem, because we can write it as H plus the indicator of the orthogonal. Okay. So in the 90s, Rockefeller proposed an algorithm to solve this problem. So first, we start from two feasible primal and non-feasible points. And the first feature of this algorithm is that it exploits the split. So first, we solve a problem only involving the objective function f.
Felipe, can sound every W? Can sound every W?
W here is the
No, every W. Talk.
Rockefeller and
Yes.
West.
Oh,
Rockefeller and West.
Rockefeller West, yes. Sorry. Okay, so first, we solve a problem related to the objective function only. And then we solve a problem, in this case, just a projection, a problem only related to the constraints. So that's the first part, the split. And since the objective function has a separable structure, then we solve for each scenario separately. We solve an approximation of the augmented Lagrangian problem. Okay. So, well, I will explain that later with more detail. So we solve here separate problems for each scenario, and then to guarantee primal feasibility, we project onto the non-anticipativity subspace, and then we make a dual update, which corresponds to somehow correction in the dual space using primal information, because the direction here that we take is the solution of these two problems minus their projections. So this is a correction step in the dual space. And here the step size is fixed, right? So that's an important thing because one of our goals is to propose a similar algorithm, but allows that a variable step size here. Instead of just a fixed part, we would like to obtain here a variable step size so that we can somehow guide over this. So the original proof of the regressive convergence of this algorithm is based on the proximal point algorithm applied to a maximally monotopic operator. And from that, we obtain convergence to a saddle point. That is, we have in the convex case. So we obtain primal and dual solutions. And in each iteration, we get closer or at least preserve the distance to the solution using this special norm. Okay, so in the convex case, we have convergence. And as I said, we have two goals. One, we want to propose an algorithm that allows changing step size from when along iterations. And also, we would like to add an acceptance test to assess the quality of this approximation that I mentioned here, right? Because this is not the augmented Lagrangian itself, but we approximate it. So we want to add an extra step that assess the quality of that approximation. And that leads us to do dual embedded forward backward method applied to stochastic optimization. So first, we make a setback. So we know that the objective function, the dual objective function, is h plus the indicator of the orthogonal, right? So we can think of, for example, applying the proximal point algorithm to this problem. And yes, we can obtain convergence, right? Using any version of the proximal point algorithm, even the original one with exact steps. The proxy is defined as a function here, h plus the indicator, or simply adding here the constraints, plus this quadratic term here. And in this case, as I said, we obtain convergence actually in the complex case, for example. But the problem or the difficulty actually is that we are not using this probability of h because we still have the coupling constraints. So even though you convert this, we are not using the structure of the problem to enhance convergence. So one option, for example, is to approximate the indicator here or use a model of the indicator here because that's the problematic constraint, because that's the one that is coupling back all variables. So our whole approach is we use a model of h plus the indicator. Well, we actually only model the indicator, and then we make a prox step using that model. And here, this is roughly speaking because we are not actually applying the proximal point algorithm in this way, but this is the main idea. We replace the objective function, the dual objective function, with a model. And the next thing that we want to do is to make sure the quality, as I said, of this model, right? Because we're making an approximation. So the algorithmic scheme of our proposal looks like this. In the dual version of it is we again start from two physical points, the primal space and the dual space, and we define our model here. Here I drop the index and the orthogonal of n just to make it simpler, right? So here our model is the original objective function h plus a linear approximation, right? Well, I forgot to mention here that this s here means that we're using any product that has weights, right? Using the probabilities. Okay. So we approximate the indicator with a linear term, and then we define. Well, the first step is to apply the prox to that model, right? But here, set in a center that we have, which it can be or maybe or not the previous iterate. So these centers are our best candidates so far for Euler solution, right? So we make a proximal step here, and we obtain here an intermediate step, and then we project that intermediate step onto the dual physical set, the orthogonal, right? And then we test the quality of these candidates. Here is input the acceptance test because I will explain in the next slide, on 2 slides. But essentially what it assesses is if this candidate is sufficiently good in terms of dual feasibility and quality of the approximation. So if it passes that test, then we update the center here, W, our new candidate becomes our candidate becomes our new center here that we use to compute the prox step. And if this candidate is not sufficiently good, then we keep the center, right? So as long as our candidate is good enough, then it becomes our new center, right? And after that, we update the model here. Essentially, we update this linear term. And this looks like the progressive hedging dual update. But since we are working in the dual version, the dual is a primal update, right? So again, here, the direction that we take is a correction step, and in this case, it is 12, because here we take the proximal point minus its projection. So here, the direction we take is a corrected step for those ones, right? And we can see here that the step size is already can be variable, right? We allow it. I haven't said how we can update it, but we can do it, and then I explain how we can do it. So we update here the slopes and define the new model. And then we train. So basically we have here the splitting because we have a proximal step for h, then the dual projection, the other part of the splitting, and then we add an acceptance test to associate the quality of the candidate, and then update the model. And we always update the model regardless if we pass or not the test. So now I will explain in detail every single step. So first, the proximal step, well, as I said, the indicator is approximated with this meter term here, and it changes in every iteration. And the good thing about this approximation is it's already separate, right? Because it's a meter product. So we replace the indicator with a separable term, and that means that our model is also separable, right? So we have h plus a linear term. So we have a separable model, and therefore the proximal step can be also computed separable for each scenario because the function that we are using is separable. So in each iteration, in the Go version of the algorithm, we are solving again an approximation of the augmented Lagrangian problem. Okay. And this actually looks like the progressive hedging subproblem, right? Just in both terms. And actually, it's essentially the same in the primal, right? Because if writing down the optimality conditions for this problem, we can prove that after solving a problem in the primal space, we can update these intermediate steps like this. So starting from the center, then we take out the direction of the solutions, right? The solution of this problem in the primal space minus the projection of the previous iteration. Right, so again, it looks like the progressive ending updating rule. And this problem here in the final space is again an approximation of the augmented Lagrangian problem. Because if we write the augmented Lagrangian problem, again here, what W hat and times the projection to n, that's zero because of our orthogonality. That's not a problem. But what prevents us to separate the augmented Lagrangian problem is this projection here in the squared norm. So we approximate here, or we replace the projection of x with this visible point here, xk, that is generated in every single iteration. That's the approximation that we make for the augmented Lagrangian, and that allows us to separate for each scenario. And again, this problem here looks like the regressive hedging subproblem because here we have the original objective function plus the linear constant relaxing the constraint plus the quadratic term constituted the augmented Lagrangian, right? So we solve this problem and then compute the intermediate step for dual sequence. As for the acceptance test, as I said, we check two things. One is low visibility. So we see if our prox point in the dual space is sufficiently equal to its projection to the dual visible set. And the accuracy of the model is checked through this. Well, this is not the criteria, right? But essentially means that the objective function h evaluated at the projection should be similar to a linearization of the model, right? Where this gradient here, gk, what that appears here, can be computed in every single iteration because it depends on the center and the new first term, right? And well, here we can actually think of applying any version or any variation of the proximal algorithm that allows exact computations. And in this case, we chose one that has a relative error condition. So here, this first one here is related to the first point that we want the point to be close to being feasible, right? It's this version here. So it computes the norm of the dual prox set points minus their projections onto the orthogonal. This second term here, especially here the epsilon, is related to the accuracy of the model. And here epsilon is nothing different from the left-hand side here minus the right-hand side. Right? And this is non-negative because the models are lower models of the objective function. And this is a lower estimate because it's a subgradient that comes from the subgradient equality. So this epsilon here is a negative. So we assess two things: dual feasibility and accuracy of the model in terms of how close we are to the current sensor, right? And this relaxation term here, sigma, lies between 0 and 1. Okay, so this is the relative error condition. And we can think, for example, of an absolute error condition, and we here just, let's say, a delta K that goes to 0, for example, and that would lead to another version or approach. As for the model update, we can say more because I already said that it looks like the progressive hedging updating rule, but it actually corresponds to applying the forward-backward method or the cross-grade method, the same, right? To this problem here. So, well, initially this looks like a little bit weird, right? Because where this comes from. So what we do is the following. So we have original power function h plus an indicator, right? So what we do is, okay, h plus indicator plus a quadratic term associated with the prox term, this one here, that would be the objective function of the proximal step. And then we say, okay, instead of us doing that, because we know we cannot express variability directly in that form, we use the dual of that objective function, and we obtain this h plus a quadratic term. Here, this part here is a function conjugate, and the function conjugate of the indicator of the orthogonal is the indicator of the original set, right? So that's why we have here the original constraint, like the primal space. And a good thing about this is that the function conjugate at this point here can be written in this way. And if we look closely, this has the pH, the progressive hedging form for subproblems. Okay, so here if we, for example, with z equals minus xk, we actually have the problem that we solve in each iteration of our method. So we are, in principle, we are not doing, we're not solving an extra problem, at least in this set. Okay. So here I just wrote how the forward-backward step looks like. And since h is complex, if we add this quadratic term here, we obtain a stronger complex function so that the conjugate has an h gradient. So we have the, let's say, basic assumptions for the convergence of the forward-backward method. And using the properties of xk and the w's, we can actually rewrite our rule for these loads as only the projection onto the non-anticipativity subspace of the solutions of the approximation of the elemental element problem. So it's even more simple that the original updating rule, but they are the same, that this is more simple. And not only simpler, but it even looks like more like the progressive hedging, right? Because in the progressive hedging, what we do in the original one, right, is we solve the problems for x, right? And then we project. And this is exactly that. We project onto the physical set. And using this identity here, we can actually rewrite the acceptance test that originally was written in dual terms. You can write it in primal terms. This is just substituting this identity here in the acceptance test. So with all those remarks and changes, we can write a primal version of our algorithm that is really, really similar to progressive hedging. So starting from two feasible points, one primal and one dual. The prox step, in this case, is again solving the approximation of the elemental element problem. And we obtain the intermediate primal points. So again, if we look closely, here this is essentially the progressive hedging subproblem, but here we are using sensors that are not necessarily changing in every single iteration. And we can allow here variable step sizes. That was one of our goals. Then we project onto the primal feasible set. And then we make the dual update. So in the primal version, we do not need to define the dual intermediate steps. Right? So we only define the projections. And again, if you look closely, this is similar to the progressive hedging dual update. Here we use, starting from the sensor, we make the correction step here, the same one as in the progressive hedging algorithm. And here again, we can allow a possible variable step size. And finally, we include the acceptance test. Again, we can make assess the quality in the primal or the dual space. It's they are equivalent. So if, for example, if our slope, taking out the primal version, if our slope is sufficiently good, then we update the sensor. Okay, so that doesn't change even in the primal version. We are always defining the sensors in the dual space. And so for the convergence analysis, we have two separate cases. One is, for example, if there's one last iteration that the acceptance test passes, And after that, we only make a tail of intercepts, saying that after that last step, we never again we never pass the test. I think that's one option. And the other option is that after accepting the test, after passing the test, we make finally many intercepts. The intercepts are the correction steps when we do not pass the test. Okay, so we either pass the test one last time and they have a tail of intercepts, or we have a finite number of steps where we accept we pass the test. So we have to make those two separate analyses. So that's the next step, the next part of the talk. So first, we analyze here I use the term rule steps, resembling somehow the terminology of model methods. Okay, it's not exactly the same, but it's the same idea. And what I mean by that is that we have a last iteration where we pass the test, right? So when that happens, after that, we have a tail of these intercepts. And well, from the definition of the algorithm, we never again update the center, right? Because we only update the center when we pass the test. We never again pass the test, we keep the center. And also for convergence, for the convergence analysis of this case, when we do not pass the test, we do not update the center, the step size, that's kept fixed. And also the error tolerance is kept fixed. Okay, so in that case, from the forward-backward convergence theory, we have that the slopes explain convergence to the solution of this problem, right? The one that we use to define the forward-backward step. And also the intermediate dwell points are asymptotic, meaning that well, that point minus their projections go to 0. Right? And actually, we can prove more. So, well, originally I didn't mention that. It was in the slide, but I skipped that. So this is only these are regularity assumption, right? We assume that the objective function has a compact domain, and that is, well, it's not that natural because here, for example, in the primal problem, I only mentioned the non-anticipativity constraints, right? But we can also have convex constraints separable for each scenario, and as long as those sets are compact, then these assumption here is satisfied, right? So it's not that unnatural. And as I said, whenever we do not pass a test, we keep the step size and the decay, the step size and the sigma k, right? And in that case, we have that the projections and the flow intermediate points converge to a solution of the flow problem here on the right. And the slopes and the solutions of the primal of the approximation of the Hamilton Lagrangian in the primal space, those also converge to a solution of the primal problem. Okay, so that's for the case where when we make when we pass one last time the acceptance test. Now, for the other case, the outer blue, meaning that we have infinitely many iterations where the acceptance test is passed, then we define a set design KO that containing all of those iterations. And the key feature, let's say here, is that the centers for the iterations in this set are always updated because we are always passing the test, right? So the conversion analysis in this case is based on this next version of the proximal point algorithm. That was originally developed for maximally monoton operators using the open enlargement of operators. But in this case, we can, in the optimization case, we can reduce analysis to the epsilon subdifferentials. Right. So the points are generated with our algorithm satisfying 3 conditions of this inexact version of the proximal point algorithm, meaning that we generate a subgradient that's an epsilon subgradient of the original function. Well, here U should be W, right? Not Q, W equals something. And also we have the acceptance test, right? Bringing with GK on here the error for the step that we make for W equals something. And why these convergence is because the centers are better monotone, meaning that if we put something that is stronger, like the property here, and that similarly actually to the reverse engineering algorithm, for these outer steps, we are either keeping the distance to the solution set or getting closer. And that this allows us to further convergence. So for the outer loop, we have to ask a little bit more. But the assumptions for the objective functions are the same. These are programmable continuous function with compact domain. And for the step sizes, they have to be away from zero. So we do not take it to converge to zero. So when those assumptions are met, then centers, the dual centers converges. Those centers converge to a dual solution here. Dual problem, right? And slopes in the primal space and the intermediate primal points, right? The ones that come from the solution of the approximation of the momentum Lagrangian, those, well, do not necessarily converge, but all of them have accumulation points, cluster points, because they the domain of F is compact. And those cluster points are the same for these two sequences, and all of them are solutions of the primal problem. Okay? So that's convergence. And an extra feature then that this version of the proximal point algorithm is that we can measure the speed of convergence. So for that, we need an extra assumption, an error bound that is classical in literature. And well, here it's written in this way. So it means that as long as we have an almost non-anticipative vector here, because U plus V is non-anticipative, so as long as we can make a small perturbation to that vector, and then the vector becomes an anticipative. And then we take some gradient of F at that point that is low visible, then the distance to that subgradient to the set of dual solutions can be bounded with a multiple of, well, here, now this should be U, right? Okay, quite required. So basically, we can measure the distance to of the points that we generate to the set of solutions. Okay. And why this helps us to measure the speed of convergence is because this error bound implies this estimate here. Okay. So if you're wondering, well, what is this error bound? Well, this is written in primal terms, but since our analysis is in the dual space, this error bound is basically saying that if we have a subgradient, okay, that would be U, subgradient of the dual function that is sufficiently small, then we can obtain an estimate of this type, right? Error bounds are related, for example, in the convex case, are equivalent, but in general are related to other common assumptions in literature, for example, quadratic growth of the function close to the set of minimizers, or the critical execution value. That is more common in the machine learning community, for example. So under the same assumptions for that guarantee convergence, and if you also add the error bound, then if, for example, if we keep the step size is bounded, then the distance from the centers to the set of solutions goes to zero linearly, meaning, well, this limit is between 0 and 1. But and this is the, let's say, extra feature. If we think of taking the step sizes going to plus infinite, right? Increasing them, but also the sigma k, which was the parameter of the acceptance set, the relative error condition, right? If that goes to 0, meaning that we are asking for more accuracy, then the method converges superlinearly, right? So we have linear convergence and superlinear convergence for the outer loop. Now some comments regarding our proposal. Well, first the comparison, right? Because I was always saying, oh, well, this looks like a recursive ending. Here we have a side-to-side comparison. So the form, or the form of these primal subproblems are essentially the same. Here in the recursive ending, we do not use centers because we do not have centers, right? But the centers here play a role of the slopes here in the recursive ending algorithm. And we are also allowing a variable step size. It helps to guide convergence. The second step is the same because we project to guarantee feasibility in the primal space. Then the dual update, again, is basically the same. And we add an acceptance test to measure the quality of the approximations that we are making. Okay, but that assessment of the quality is not for free, because to evaluate, especially to define the epsilon, we need to evaluate H at the projection. So in principle, we would need to solve an extra minimization problem to assess the quality of the approximation. And actually, the acceptance test implies a sufficient descent condition, like this one here. So if you're familiar with bounding methods, this kind of looks like that. But here, we are major term M. In this case, could be variable. Right, so that's a slight difference for compared to bounding methods. And this is an extra step that we are now studying, is that we can accelerate the projection step, that was a forward-backward step, using any acceleration of that method, for example, this step. So it would look like this. Well, this is just computations, but actually you can think of applying any acceleration of forward-backward and obtain essentially the projection step would change a little bit, but it would still be a projection step. Okay. So we have some preliminary numerical results. First, for Farmer's problem. So we assess our method for a two-stage linear programming problem to maximize the profit of the farmer, right? And this is a small problem because he only has 3 scenarios for the yield, right? Saying about okay, so we are producing above average, or below average, right? And in the first stage, we have to decide how much of each crop we plant, right? Or let's say the farmer plants. And the second stage, we are planting right, we are getting our production, and then we want to decide how much we sell. Okay. So what we study, the things that we study is how to define or how to update the sets, right? Because that is one of the main differences that we can have variable step size. And from the numerical results, we obtain here we have the objective function. Well, this is small problem, so we actually know what is the minimizer and the optimal value. So here on the left, we have the objective function value for different values that here we have the mutation parameter, gamma, that defines here how we update the step size. And here on the right, we have the primal feasibility. And we can see here that we cannot be too aggressive, right? Because we have this too large, then well, it's still kind of 10 minus 3. Okay, but as long as we are not too aggressive, we are obtaining good results for the objective function and also good results for primal feasibility. Right? But this is more problem, so we want to see how this method behaves for a larger problem, and this problem is called APL. Oh, I didn't get it wrong because it's APLOP. But it's basically a linear problem in 2 stages for the expansion of an energy system. Okay. And here, what is uncertain is the demand, which is usual, right, in energy optimization problems, and also the capacity of the scenarios. Because in the first stage, we build capacity, we build plants, let's say, and in the second stage, we operate the system. So the uncertainty is the demand of the consumers, and also the capacity of the build plants, right? So here I'll show a comparison with our method here in the third line. The dual embedded forward-backward method. And we compare it with the original progressive hedging and a bundle-like progressive hedging algorithm. Is the word we call it, right? So as I mentioned before, also for bundle, but also for our approach here, we need to minimize an extra minimization problem, right, to define epsilon. So that's why we compare here with half the number of iterations because we, in principle, would be making double the effort in principle, right? So we can see here that even though depth does not beat progressive hedging, we can obtain better visibility, right? So here we are still working on that because we have to see we have more parameters, right, compared to progressive hedging. So we have sigma, we have possible variable step sizes, and also in the non-like progressive ending, we have your major terms. So there are more things to see, but these results, at least from my eyes, are not too discouraging. Right? We are still working on that, but there's some hope here to beat progressive ending. And also, this is a linear problem, so progressive ending is not that bad for that. And to finish, there's some ongoing work that is to apply more or less the same ideas for a more general problem to minimize f plus g plus with a map matrix, right? So somewhat general formulation for complex problems. And what we do here is, okay, so we use the dual problem here, and then we apply the forward backward method to in a similar way that I explained before. So here we have f, the conjugate of f, plus the quadratic term associated with the proximal point. So we compute the dual of that problem, and we apply the forward backward method to that, and we retrieve, well, here def is the same as before, it's dual embedded forward backward, augmented Lagrangian method, because in this case, we obtain an approximation of the augmented Lagrangian problem for the general formulation, not just for the stochastic optimization setting. So again, we have similar features as I described, because we compute proximal steps separated for f and g. And we also here, depending on the variation of the proximal point algorithm that we use, we can use either a relative error repetition or an absolute error repetition to assess the quality of the approximations that we're making. Okay. So here's some references, well, not too many for now. This first one here is the original progressive ending algorithm, right? For the plural lenses are R and W. This is the inexact version of the proximal point algorithm that we use. But as I said, we can think of applying other version of proximal point algorithm, and we would obtain a different acceptance test. And the last the last figure here is the one that obtains analysis of the bundle-like progressive ending algorithm. So that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Questions?
I have one question.
Good.
Hi guys, how are you? I want to know about the error bound that Felipe is using. Do you have any instances where this happens, like problems that this error bound is fulfilled?
Yes. So I don't think there's right? What are they? So that's like here. Can you see the slides? Yes.
Can you see the slides? Hello.
Yes.
Okay. So well, the error bounds in general are satisfied for example for linear problems or some quadratic problems too. But for example, also I mentioned that error bounds are related to the vertical symmetry quality, and actually these error bounds, but another regularity assumption implies vertical symmetry quality. So in principle, some problems that satisfy the vertical symmetry qualities also satisfy error bound. What type of functions satisfy the KO inequality? Right? The most common ones are distinct algebraic functions, and those are the ones that their graph can be written as the solution of a system of polynomials. Find a number of polynomial equations or inequalities.
Okay, thank you.
Claudia wants to ask.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. Nice work. I wanted to ask. It seems to me that outer loops are what we call serious steps, and inner loops are what we call null steps. Except that for the outer loop, it is a more strict serious step. So in principle, you will be doing less serious steps than with the bundle version of this. So it seems to me that that's the main difference, that the difference is in the acceptance test that is stronger.
Yes.
So my question is there a way, first, I think that all the convergence unified framework that we did, maybe you could use it, no? I don't know. And the second comment is there a way of, because you will be doing less serious steps, supposedly better serious steps. So perhaps the conversion rate will be better. Did you think of comparing the conversion rates of the bundle progressive hedging and of this one, that is a very serious method?
Sorry, so what was the question?
If you can compare.
The question is, you are telling him? Okay.
Yes.
The comparison of the conversion rates.
Of the bundle and of the spot.
Yeah, I mean, totally be compared. But for now, for example, for the regular results that we have, all the ones that I showed for a proposal, we only made inner steps. So in principle, for now, we cannot compare because our implementation is not making outer steps for now.
I don't understand well what you are saying, Felipe. I'm throwing this in the air because it can be interesting to know if making a more strict serious step will result in so you make less steps, but each step is faster. It takes you faster to where you want to go. Maybe in the primal or in the dual, I don't know. It could be interesting to know if this is the case.
If I can join the discussion, I would say that probably yes. And the reason for that is that our serious steps are actually approximate proximal point steps.
They are always proximal point steps. They're all of them, except that this with the relative error, what you are trying to do is to approach the exact proximal point, and the bundle is kind of more like this, or like that was the sense.
That's what I meant. So since you have more like something which is closer to a proximal sequence, it should be faster in the way you're saying, the way that it's it's a better step overall, but.
It should be possible to find, to compare on paper the relation. The rate.
But to quantify this can be difficult.
No, but they can apply the same. It's the same theory that is applied in both cases. You can apply for the rate of convergence. It seems to me. Yeah.
But informally, it is probably faster, but to say exactly how much to quantify with the difference can be difficult, I think.
Yes, I think the problem that is the same theory, so have the same tools, it will be hard for you to see the difference. That's what Misha is.
Yeah. If I could say something here, so I mean, the goal of the project when Felipe visited me was to try to get a superlinear convergence result. And the only way I could think of to achieve that is to use the superlinear convergence result for proximal point.
Okay, we are doing
that's what you're approximating. So that's why we kind of went in this direction.
Yeah, it's sigma going to zero. This is
it's TK going to infinity. It's TK going to infinity is what it is.
And sigma going to zero. Sigma, the error has to go to zero.
Right, but the proximal step size. Yeah, we designed a version. We designed this so you can take the proximal step size to infinity, which is how you get superlinear with proximal point.
So this is nice. This is why I think that there might be maybe some comparison of the rates. They are both linear, let's say. And how do they compare? You will be making much more null steps because it's more strict in terms of serious, but serious should be better. No, just study.
Yeah, because the analysis was kind of driven by, I mean, we started from trying to make the serious steps superlinear, because if you don't have that, then you're not going to get anywhere, but, right? So.
Any more questions? Okay, so let's thank Felipe again for the talk and thank for the audience. Okay.